Hello, everyone. Kicking off with the first fireside chat of the day from Asia to ASEAN, learnings from the successes of South Asian markets. We have with us Singh Jaini, the founder and CEO of the Digital Fifth, and Anup Kumar, South Asia Equity Lead of IFC World Bank. So, over to you, Samir and Anup, for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagati, and great to have Anup you here. I think IFC has been doing fabulous stuff across regions wherever we go. I mean, we have been to Myanmar and few more countries, and wherever we go, we see IFC doing tons of work. So maybe before we start this session, I think before we talk about how South Asian entities can actually do more work in ASEAN, I think before we go there, I think it'll be useful for us to understand a bit of context about Anup, from you on what IFC has been doing, and maybe some view on the fintech from your side overall.
Yeah. Thank you, Samir. Thanks for having me, first of all. Good morning, everyone. Let me very quickly share a little bit about IFC and what we do. So that will help answer your question. So IFC is part of World Bank Group, and we are focused on private sector development with the objective of helping private sector flourish and creating jobs. Financial inclusion is one of our key focus areas, and that's the reason we look at fintech space very, very closely, because fintech can play a very, very important role in the financial inclusion space. Helping basically, if you see South Asia or even East Asia, most of the markets, there is huge underpenetration of access to finance. And the IFC is very actively involved in all these markets. In fact, if you see the presence of IFC, it basically operates in underdeveloped, developing markets, right from Latin America, Africa, Eastern Europe, South Asia, East Asia. So these are the markets where we operate.
Okay. So I think we have been talking about fintechs doing fabulous stuff within the countries. I mean, this is a personal question for myself as well. I mean, I personally also, we have been doing pretty fine in India, but I think as a startup, you always think that when do we need to step into the other countries? And it's one to do one or two deals here and there, which is the case with many of early stage startups. How do they go global, right? Or maybe at least not even global, maybe how do they enter ASEAN countries, right? So because I think culture-wise, thought process-wise, I think they are very close, and I believe that from a pricing perspective, they will also find an easier correlation between these segments. For example, from India to Myanmar, Vietnam, or Singapore, maybe reverse also. Something can happen. So, any thoughts on when should startups think about going at least ASEAN-wise global rather than full global, and what are the next steps?
Yes, I mean that's a very, very interesting question. In fact, and especially in the context of startups, it becomes even more interesting. So first, let me answer it in three different parts. First part is, what business model does a startup have? And as part of that business model, how important it is to actually get integrated with the other markets.
Mm-hmm.
So if integration is very, very important, because then the two-way street will happen in terms of business flow. In those cases, there is no second thought, right? One has to go to all these markets and see how business can flow from one market to the other market, right? So, I'll give you one simple example. Let's say you look at investment space. In the investment space, a lot of people from India may want to invest in other markets, and a lot of Indians probably staying outside may want to invest in Indian markets, right? And therefore, you need to create a bridge or platforms in both the markets so that people can have access. And therefore, this becomes an integral part of the business model. However, if the business model is not so much dependent on international markets or creating presence in foreign markets, in that case, I would just want to highlight a couple of points. If the product itself is ready and it can be easily replicated in other markets without consuming too much of bandwidth, then one can certainly
I think Anup has just lost connection. We'll wait for a minute or so for him to come back. I
One
think
will
this is a
have
typical
to
challenge.
pick and choose depending on pros and cons of each situation. Thank you.
So, Anup, we lost you in last maybe 1.5, 2 minutes. It'll be useful if you could just talk about it because we just did not have a connection.
Oh, uh, yeah. So basically, what I was saying is that when let's say any Indian startup which has already a well-established product, for example, and it can be easily replicated in other markets without consuming too much of bandwidth, then it's an easier decision. You can sort of tie up with some foreign players and get into that market and establish your presence there also. However, if that's not the case, then one needs to evaluate which market is more important for the founders. Is the local market or the foreign market? Now, if you go to the foreign market, then you spread yourself too thin. Will it then affect your business in the local market? So in each case, one will have to evaluate and decide what is the right time to go to these markets. So it's a case by case decision.
No, I agree. I think we have been thinking about entering Middle East market and Southeast Asia market, but it's always a game of how much can you invest, what scale you can sort of go with your team and all of that. I think I totally get your point. So let's move to the next point. In terms of, let's say, financial inclusion is largely has been there without too much of fintech involvement within ASEAN. I mean, whatever work we've done outside, we've always seen that technology has been largely being used. Now, what's your take? Where do you see the involvement of fintechs in sort of financial inclusion within ASEAN, and what are the opportunities which exist for maybe other startups to enter this segment?
Yes. So in fact, financial inclusion, it becomes. I would rather put it like this: that you're absolutely right, Samir. That last few years already, a lot of work is happening on the financial inclusion side. Be it microfinance, be it affordable housing, be it MSME finance. In India, for example, opening of so many bank accounts, the initiative which was taken by the government or the Prime Minister. So a lot of financial inclusion work has already happened. Uh, Now with technology, it becomes even more uh, you know interesting and easier to achieve more and more financial inclusion. And let me explain through an example, and I'll take you to the transport industry. For example, in the transport industry, you see the railways, you see the large trucks, and then you see the small trucks, right? The Tata Aces, the trains or the railways, they take goods from point A to point B, right? But they don't take the goods into the deeper areas of the city, towns, or villages, right? You see then the large trucks picking up the stuff and taking goods to the deeper areas. But then in India, there are many smaller places, and with much narrower roads, and there you need Tata Aces, right, to reach. So all three play a role of complementarity. Now bringing it back to financial services, you see the banks, they did a phenomenal job. They are doing a phenomenal job in terms of providing financial services. Then you saw NBFCs and microfinance institutions and affordable housing finance companies playing a phenomenal role. And now you see fintechs, So, for example, if you see the small ticket products, it's very difficult for a traditional player to offer. And in these markets, typically the income levels are so low that a traditional player, from operating cost point of view, it becomes very difficult to provide such products and services. So fintechs can play a very important role, and we are very optimistic. Thank you.
Okay. And I mean, within the fintech domain, do you think there are specific countries which are a bit more richer on the fintech ecosystem and inclusion, both whichever way you want to talk about, which maybe we should also have a look at and saying, can we replicate that both ways, right? India to outside, outside to India, or maybe any country to any country, where you feel that the effort done on fintech side is exceptionally high.
Yeah, so at a global level, if you see, there are different markets, and I'm not talking about the developed market, right? Because there the context is different, the customer segment is different, the needs are different. But if you see markets which are underdeveloped, developing, in each market, depending on the type of entrepreneurs available there, or the ecosystem, the way it has evolved, it might be at different stage, but the way it has evolved, or the financial infrastructure which is in place, you see different types of innovation happening. So for example, if you see Latin America, there are some very, very innovative business models coming up there, and a lot can be learned in South Asia from those markets. Now if you see India, for example, in India itself, whether it is payments or lending or insurtech or investment platforms, in all these areas, a lot of innovation is already happening, a lot of business models are already there, and they are trying to find their own space and create a sustainable business model. Now if you go to some of the smaller countries in ASEAN, you will see that in those countries, it's a bit early for them. Probably the ecosystem is not fully developed. Maybe the angel or VC network system is not there who can provide funding to start with. And then maybe the regulations need to be put in place. Maybe the mobile network and connectivity needs to be put in place. No, once all those things are in place, then you develop the payment infrastructure, and on the layer of payment infrastructure, a lot of other innovative products and services could be developed. For example, like we are seeing in India, on payments, lending is coming up as a product now. There are a lot of data gets captured on the payments platform. So in each country, the situation is different. There is a journey which one has to go through, but certainly one country can learn from the other country. Thank you.
Okay. And any specific innovation which you have really liked? I mean, so this was market level. You went to the South America as well, but generally, any specific innovation you feel that it should have become faster, bigger, sharper, early? I mean, sometimes it takes a lot of time, right? Any innovation to, I mean, UPI has moved to other countries. Something like that, which you feel we have seen, which has happened in other countries, but it's not come to other countries at all.
So let me first of all, I would say again, linking with the previous response that I was giving, that each country has its own specific context, and therefore the innovation should be in that context, in terms of solving problem, with respect to that country, that market requirement, that customer segment requirement. Now, if we go deeper into each of these areas, like whether it is payment, lending, insurtech, etc. In each of these areas, a lot of innovative business models are coming up. For example, if you see in Latin America, a lot of agri-finance models are coming up there. And India can, let's say, or South Asia, rather, can see how agri-financing can be picked up from those markets. In India also, by the way, a lot of innovation is happening on the agri-finance side. If you look at the SME finance side, some interesting lending models have evolved using FinTech. And that, one of the issues that SMEs face is doing not having access to finance because of not having sufficient collateral. Now, can fintechs develop models which can help giving loans without a collateral, at the same time also manage risk? Now, other very interesting thing which is highly relevant for markets like ours is a lot of people can't afford to do large ticket transactions. So in India, if you see, a lot of platforms offer the facility to do low ticket transactions at very reasonable cost. That itself is huge innovation, and that would lead to more and more adoption. For example, you can buy a 200-300 rupees insurance policy online in just 2-3 minutes, right? So this itself is innovation, which leads to more and more compliance. So so that is how I would say that different markets can learn from each other, and one ultimate innovation should help in solving a problem and expanding the market.
Okay. Okay. Before we take the next question up, my request to all, everybody who's in the audience, you can ask your question on the panel. We will, the last couple of questions, we'll take it from your side, not from our side. So I think it'll be good if you can share your questions back to us, and we'll pick them up. So coming back to you spoke about. So yeah, I think Jagrati, you had anything?
Yeah, so sorry to jump in here. So for the audience, you all have an option to either raise your hand. So through raise hand option, you will be getting an opportunity to be on stage and ask the question directly to Anup and Sameer, or else you can just post your questions on the question tab.
Yeah, I think we'll wait for your questions to come up. In the interim, I'll ask my question as well, and wait for other.
Okay, thank you.
So, so
Anup, if you can hear us, it would be great that if you could switch off your camera so that all your bandwidth doesn't get exhausted.
Sorry, Jagriti, I couldn't hear in between. I don't know if you were referring anything to me.
No, actually, we lost the connection of yours. So I would recommend that you might even switch off your video so that all your bandwidth doesn't get exhausted and you can be available on audio.
okay. Unfortunately, all of you will have to see only me, which is not a great idea. But yeah, live with it. So let's move to the other thought process on collaboration side. I think Anup, what are the opportunities do you see a collaboration between fintech and banks? We have seen some action, but I think useful for you to for us to understand from your perspective, what are the opportunities, be it in SME or be it retail, whichever segment or inclusion side you see the opportunities of collaboration.
Yeah, so this is something very interesting I have been observing for the past few years in India, and one interesting trend I noticed that when the NBFC sector was growing, then banks played a very important role in supporting the NBFCs, right? A lot of financing which the NBFCs they get from the banks, and then the NBFCs are ultimately able to take that finance to the end borrower, whether an individual or a small business. Now, same thing we are seeing in the fintech ecosystem. So a lot of fintechs that you see today, let's focus, let's say, on the lending side first, and you will see that quite a few of them, they don't have their own balance sheets, right? So what they do, they collaborate with either banks or NBFCs. So banks or NBFCs provide the balance sheet to them. So these fintech players could either take some risk, or they could just be sourcing customers on behalf of banks and NBFCs. Now, in the process, what is happening is that more and more people are getting access to finance, which otherwise banks or NBFCs were not able to reach. It's happening already in the bank and in the lending side. Obviously, if you see the payment space, again there is collaboration, right? If you see the investment space, there is collaboration happening with the brokerage firms, the traditional brokerage firms, or other players in the capital markets. If you see the insurance space, the traditional insurance players are collaborating with the fintech players. So I mean, it's collaboration all across the verticals, which is already happening, and that is the reason we are seeing that so many fintechs have flourished with the support of some of these larger players. At the same time, the larger players have also learned a lot from the fintechs, who come up with innovative ideas and bring a lot of energy and put in that passion to reach to the market, which was not served earlier.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Jagrati, do we have more time to continue because we have reached 20 minutes, or because I've seen one question for sure, but Jagrati, I'll leave that point to you.
Yeah, so Samir, we can take this question. This is posted on the chat section by Preeta.
Yeah, I've seen.
We'll take this question, and after this, maybe we can end the session.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. So there's a question which Preeta has asked. Basically, what she's saying is that there's a lot of talk about this alternate data and analytics in Indian context. But do we really see it on the ground getting utilized, this alternate data? And if yes, in what circumstances, not just in India and outside, whatever you have seen, because you have seen wider usage as well.
Yeah, so I would see, the way I would want to share my thoughts here is, uh, yes, alternate data is getting gathered. You know, so there are a lot of players who are experimenting with different type of data, uh, be it at the individual level, be it at the business level, and so that journey has started.
Okay.
Now, question is, can alternate data uh, help based on whatever is already acquired in terms of taking very clear decisions? Uh, I would think that maybe it is still some more time to go on that front. So you see a mixture, which is there. So uh, alternate data should be sufficient, to actually do a very thorough analysis, and then try to arrive at whether it is really helping in decision making, uh, and things need to be back tested. So I would say that the journey has started, but it might still take some more time when there'll be more clarity on how alternate data can really help in improving decisions significantly, and reduce dependence on some of the traditional ways of doing things.
I think that's a good point. In fact, we also be seeing. I personally believe that the bank data is the alternate data. Whatever transaction I do really in my life, which may not be on the bank data, bank system will be there. For example, we are trying to do this transactions which is which is done by a milk farmer for the milk produce, right? So the actual transaction of how much amount of milk he produces, what is the quality and all which he has, and when he sells, and then gets the money back. So we try to do for one of the client that underwriting on top of that, and we did it for those customers who did not even have accounts, or we had who had Jandan account but zero balances because they all transactions were on cash. So I think it is happening, and we have seen almost zero NPA on that platform as well. So I think so good point, Anup. I think the usage is just starting, but hopefully it will scale up as we go forward. So with this, I think we close now. Anup, thank you for your insights, and I think